Read the Bible in a year, day 91, Judges 6 and Judges 7. Judges 6. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight, so the Lord handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. The Midianites were so cruel that the Israelites made hiding places for themselves in the mountains, caves, and strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, marauders from Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east would attack Israel, camping in the land and destroying crops as far as Gaza. They left the Israelites with nothing to eat, taking all the sheep, goats, cattle, and donkeys. These enemy hordes, coming with their livestock and tents, were as thick as locusts. They arrived in droves of camels, too numerous to count, and they stayed until the land was stripped bare. So Israel was reduced to starvation by the Midianites. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. When they cried out to the Lord because of Midian, the Lord sent a prophet to the Israelites. He said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you up out of slavery in Egypt. I rescued you from the Egyptians and from all who oppressed you. I drove out your enemies and gave you their land. I told you, I am the Lord, your God. You must not worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you now live, but you have not listened to me." Then the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash of the clan of Abiezer. Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "Mighty hero, the Lord is with you." "Sir," Gideon replied, "if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say, 'The Lord brought us up out of Egypt'? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites." Then the Lord turned to him and said, "Go with the strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you." "But Lord," Gideon replied, "how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest in the whole tribe of Manasseh, and I am the least in my entire family." The Lord said to him, "I will be with you, and you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man." Gideon replied, "If you are truly going to help me, show me a sign to prove that it is really the Lord speaking to me. Don't go away until I come back and bring my offering to you." He answered, "I will stay here until you return." Gideon hurried home. He cooked a young goat, and with a basket of flour, he baked some bread without yeast. Then, carrying the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot, he brought them out and presented them to the angel who was under the great tree. The angel of God said to him, "Place the meat and the unleavened bread on this rock and pour the broth over it." And Gideon did as he was told. Then the angel of the Lord touched the meat and bread with the tip of the staff in his hand, and fire flamed up from the rock and consumed all he had brought, and the angel of the Lord disappeared. When Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he cried out, "Oh, sovereign Lord, I'm doomed. I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." "It is all right," the Lord replied. "Do not be afraid. You will not die." And Gideon built an altar to the Lord there and named it Yahweh Shalom, which means, "The Lord is peace." The altar remains in Ophrah, in the land of the clan of Abiezer to this day. That night the Lord said to Gideon, "Take the second bull from your father's herd, the one that is 7 years old. Pull down your father's altar to Baal, and cut down the Asherah pole standing beside it. Then build an altar to the Lord your God here on this hilltop sanctuary, laying the stones carefully. Sacrifice the bull as a burnt offering on the altar, using as fuel the wood of the Asherah pole you cut down." So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord had commanded. But he did it at night, because he was afraid of the other members of his father's household and the people of the town. Early the next morning, as the people of the town began to stir, someone discovered that the altar of Baal had been broken down and that the Asherah pole beside it had been cut down. In their place, a new altar had been built, and on it were the remains of the bull that had been sacrificed. The people said to each other, "Who did this?" And after asking around and making a careful search, they learned that it was Gideon, the son of Joash. "Bring out your son," the men of the town demanded of Joash. "He must die for destroying the altar of Baal and for cutting down the Asherah pole." But Joash shouted to the mob that confronted him, "Why are you defending Baal? Will you argue his case? Whoever pleads his case will be put to death by morning. If Baal is truly a god, let him defend himself and destroy the one who broke down his altar." From then on, Gideon was called Jerub-Baal, which means "let Baal defend himself," because he broke down Baal's altar. Soon afterward, the armies of Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east formed an alliance against Israel and crossed the Jordan, camping in the valley of Jezreel. Then the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon with power. He blew a ram's horn as a call to arms, and the men of the clan of Abiezer came to him. He also sent messengers through Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, summoning their warriors, and all of them responded. Then Gideon said to God, "If you're truly going to use me to rescue Israel as you promised, prove it to me in this way. I will put a wool fleece on the threshing floor tonight. If the fleece is wet with dew in the morning, but the ground is dry, then I will know that you are going to help me rescue Israel as you promised." And that is just what happened. When Gideon got up early the next morning, he squeezed the fleece and wrung out a whole bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to God, "Please don't be angry with me, but let me make one more request. Let me use the fleece for one more test. This time, let the fleece remain dry while the ground around it is wet with dew." So that night God did as Gideon asked. The fleece was dry in the morning, but the ground was covered with dew.
Judges chapter 7. So Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and his army got up early and went as far as the spring of Harod. The armies of Midian were camped north of them in the valley near the hill of Moriah. The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many warriors with you. If I let you fight the Midianites, the Israelites will boast to me that they saved themselves by their own strength. Therefore, tell the people, whoever is timid or afraid may leave this mountain and go home." So 22,000 of them went home, leaving only 10,000 who were willing to fight. But the Lord told Gideon, "There are still too many. Bring them down to the spring, and I will test them to determine who will go with you and who will not." When Gideon took his warriors down to the water, the Lord told him, "Divide the men into two groups. In one group, put all those who cup water in their hands and lap it up with their tongues like dogs. In the other group, put all those men who kneel down and drink with their mouths in the stream." Only 300 of the men drank from their hands. All the others got down on their knees and drank with their mouths in the stream. The Lord told Gideon, "With these 300 men, I will rescue you and give you victory over the Midianites. Send all the others home." So Gideon collected the provisions and rams, horns of the other warriors, and sent them home. But he kept the 300 men with him. The Midianite camp was in the valley just below Gideon. That night, the Lord said to him, "Get up, go down into the Midianite camp, for I have given you victory over them. But if you're afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purha. Listen to what the Midianites are saying, and you will be greatly encouraged. Then you will be eager to attack." So Gideon took Purha and went down to the edge of the enemy camp. The armies of Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east had settled in the valley like a swarm of locusts. Their camels were like grains of sand on the seashore, too many to count. Gideon crept up just as a man was telling his companion about a dream. The man said, "I had this dream, and in my dream a loaf of barley bread came tumbling down into the Midianite camp. It hit a tent, turned it over, and knocked it flat." His companion answered, "Your dream can only mean one thing. God has given Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite, victory over Midian and all its allies." When Gideon heard the dream and the interpretation, he bowed in worship before the Lord. Then he returned to the Israelite camp and shouted, "Get up, for the Lord has given you victory over the Midianite hordes." He divided the 300 men into 3 groups and gave each man a ram's horn and a clay jar with a torch in it. He said to them, "Keep your eyes on me. When I come to the edge of the camp, do just as I do. As soon as I had those with me blow the ram's horns, blow your horns too, all around the entire camp, and shout, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" It was just after midnight, after the changing of the guard, when Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the Midianite camp. Suddenly, they blew the ram's horns and broke their clay jars. Then all 3 groups blew their horns and broke their jars. They held the blazing torches in their left hands and the horns in their right hands, and they all shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." Each man stood at his position around the camp and watched as all the Midianites rushed around in panic, shouting as they ran to escape. When the 300 Israelites blew their ram's horns, the Lord caused the warriors in the camps to fight against each other with their swords. Those who were not killed fled to places as far away as Beth Shittah, near Zerah, and to the border of Abel Meholah, near Tabbath. Then Gideon sent for the warriors of Naphtali, Asher, and Manasseh, who joined in chasing the army of Midian. Gideon also sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down to the attack the Midianites. Cut them off at the shallow crossings of the Jordan River at Bath Barah." So all the men of Ephraim did as they were told. They captured Oreb and Zeb, the 2 Midianite commanders, killing Oreb at the rock of Oreb and Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. And they continued to chase the Midianites afterward. The Israelites brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon, who was by the Jordan River.
Here we have Gideon, an amazing individual in the Bible who is introduced here. And he is somebody who gets singled out by the Lord. We see him in the bottom of a wine press, threshing wheat in order to hide the grain from the Midianites. So he's trying to protect the Israelites, himself, his family. We're not sure. It doesn't say it at this point, but he's doing something good. And God, he singles him out.
Yeah, and God calls Gideon a mighty hero at this point. And as we know, Gideon is chosen to be a judge to lead the Israelite people. And up until this point, he hasn't done anything. But God sees something in his character that's different, I think. And that's why he calls him mighty hero.
And I think that, he at this point doesn't realize it's the Lord. He's just talking to somebody. And he says, what? If the Lord is with us, then why has all this happened to us? Mm-hmm. And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? He's like, where is God? And it just made me think about how often I have said that, other people have said that, when there's been a situation that is devastating or very difficult to deal with. And we can look around and say, where's God? God, where are you? Why is this happening to me? Why have you allowed this to happen? I just even remember as, after I became a Christian and I had to deal with something very difficult. And I remember thinking, wow, I've become a Christian. I thought that we weren't supposed to go through hard things. Like, why is this happening? Isn't God going to protect me from this happening? Mm-hmm. And I had to learn that he does allow things to happen. It's just our response is going to make the difference, because good things are going to happen to Christians, bad things are going to happen to Christians. But the thing that makes us stand out is, how do we respond? Do we trust God when those bad things happen?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, he calls them. It's interesting because he says that the Lord is with you, you mighty hero. And I think it's kind of funny because he says, well, if the Lord is with us, and he questions it, he doesn't say with me, he says with us. He makes a general statement as opposed to God's personal, intimate call.
Yeah, because the Lord, he said, I'm going to, he talks specifically to Gideon and he gives him a mission. He says, go in the strength that you have and rescue Israel.
Sure.
So he saw that there was something in his character. He was already trying to help Israel by hiding that grain and risking his life. And God saw that and he's like, you know what? I want you to do more. I'm going to send you out to do more. So I'm sending you. And Gideon is just, how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest. Like, basically, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And how many times have we said that when God has called us to do something in our life that's going to take faith? How many times have we said, who am I?
Yeah.
Who am I? Why are you choosing me? Like, I don't know if I can do this. In other words, there's other people who are stronger, who have bigger armies, who have more talent. But God, he makes his choice for his reason, and he knows who can actually do the task. And a lot of times he sees more in us than we see in ourselves.
True. It's kind of a throwback to Moses when God called Moses and said, who am I? I can't even speak very well. And then God used and trained him to become the leader of the entire nation of Israel.
And we see something here, is like you said, the similarity is there's a humility there. It's not like, oh yeah, of course God's going to choose me. There was a real humility where, people, they actually did have things, if you could look at it, tangible things that made them look weak. He said, we have the weakest tribe. That was a fact. Moses had a problem speaking. That was a fact. But God saw more, and he can use our weaknesses, the things that have caused us to struggle or have made us feel insecure, and he can turn those things around in us, and he can actually use those things and make them our strengths.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because God sees something special in Gideon. We read the next story about the fleece and the testing of God, and I think God sees Gideon's insecurity. He was so insecure that he said, well, okay, prove to me, God, make this fleece wet and the ground dry with when dew comes on the ground. And God answered his prayer. And then he says, okay, I know you did that, but do it the opposite way. And God answered his prayer.
Because, if there's a fleece on the ground and there's dew, that fleece is going to be wet. That's what comes off of sheep, and it's wool, and it sucks up the moisture. And so if everything around it's wet, that fleece is going to be wet. So for it to be dry, it's kind of almost impossible for that to happen. So it's like, okay, well, maybe there was, the sun was shining darker, not darker, brighter that day, and sucked up. Who knows? Like, he could have been thinking, okay, maybe that's why it happened. And then, okay, well, then try it the other way. And somehow God was able to do it, but he did it just to show, yes.
Yeah.
It also shows me that we can ask God things. We can ask him, God, can you help me to understand this? Can you, we can pray specific prayers. God, if you want this to happen, please, can you show me something? Now, I know I've prayed before I became a Christian, God, if you exist, make that tree disappear. Well, it didn't happen. But there are things that has happened where God actually shows us, he answers our prayer to help us in our faith.
Yeah, God is always going to be there to protect his people.
Yeah.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.